listening to all those acronyms, because in plastics we have, so in plastics we have lots of these acronyms, obviously everywhere. For me, it's very easy to talk about plastics because you heard that, and yes, I am biased because I'm in this industry, but I've also looked at a lot of the stats around it, and I can tell you now, it is the best place to be. We love this earth, and I think Yaku have warmed us up to the fact that we only have one planet. We really need to look after that planet. But we start seeing more of this, and you read about a planet that's just covered with plastics, and plastics that's just been everywhere. And we don't have to be, if you live on the coast, and we heard that Yaku is enjoying the cleanup campaigns, which just come out of September, where a lot of people got involved in that. I mean, they clean up the beach. This specific beach cleanup in Durban, which was 2 years ago, was 240 bags, just in one spot. And that night, it rained again, and there was another pile on the beach. So this is the stuff we live with every day, and that gives us all these bad vibes about plastics. This is not far from where I'm living, the Henlops River, and for people that can see closer, there's a lot of polystyrene there. Which is in high demand at the moment. The guys making products from used polystyrene can't get enough. But how do we get it from that river to that guy's factory? Because it weighs absolutely nothing. And it's going to take up a lot of space. So those are the challenges. There's this little township next to the Black River in Cape Town. And if you actually look at the house part next to the channel, you'll see it's very clean. They don't have a bin on their pavement. Impact bins haven't got there yet. So they can't once a week put in something in the bin, and guess what? 9 o'clock it's gone. Because they don't have a bin. So what do they do with it? So it's easy for us to say, we must get rid of the plastic, or we must train these people, we must go to these schools and tell them, do not litter. But what must they do? They also have an empty chips packet and an empty wrapper around their meat or maybe they're not eating it anymore. You can spend 10 minutes on Google and you'll find hundreds of these pictures. Here's ocean animals as well as land-based animals that got caught, got caught in plastic. What I'm not showing you is at the same time, if you just don't put plastic there, but you just say packaging, you get as many pictures of animals caught in glass and in tin cans and in aluminium cans. But we don't ever see that in the media. We see the plastic challenges. You can open newspapers. Now I'm subscribed to a couple of online newspapers, and you just see these headings. It just comes at you all the time. And if you're totally uninformed and you don't study plastics, polymer science, or whatever, and you just have to rely on that, you're going to say, plastic is bad. Plastic is definitely the foe. We don't need it, we don't want it. So the question is, do we need it? Or maybe I can ask you guys quickly with a show of hands, how many believe we can live without plastic? Shucks, you must be in the plastics industry. Super, there's one brave enough guy that says, I think I don't need it. So if we need it, where do we need it? And we don't want to look too close to some of these pictures, but those are all African street shops, street suppliers. And let me tell you, this bottom picture, it's not my own picture, but I was in a similar street in Zambia buying these little capentas, and they go with the flies. So you can see the capentas underneath it to say, okay, how many do you want? They're really not the ideal. This is more to our liking. We like to see our food nicely hygienic, packed, you know exactly what is inside. So I think we can say we need packaging. Imagine buying pawpaws that's not protected, and they're all bruised if you don't eat them that very same day by tomorrow those little bruised places are not edible anymore. But do we need as much packaging as what you see? Now that bottom right-hand picture is my son that ordered something from Take-A-Lot. I mean, it's a cable. He had fancy names for it, what you're adapting with what. But, I mean, why did you need protective wrap around it, in a plastic bag, in a box, and the box was in a plastic bag? For a cable. You definitely don't need that. The banana picture you often see, there's obviously an English one with the pennies. But I mean, why would you cling wrap it on a polystyrene tray? And the hook is an interesting one, because when I spoke to Massmart specifically about that, they say that's about pilferage. Because you don't need the hook packaged. But then us shoppers, and typically in South Africa, we see, nice hook in the pocket. And there are losses, but now it's on a massive cardboard, and you think of it twice before you try and put it in. But I hear people steal tins of baby food. I mean, where do you put that? Okay. So if we just look at the functionality, and we already heard Roelof talking about all the farming activities. I've bumped into some farmers on the way here, so I know there's a couple of you here. If you look on your farm, your dependency on plastics. So in the whole thing of food production, yields and losses, bananas is a classic example that it's blue because you allow certain UV rays through. It creates a mini micro atmosphere around that bunch, and your whole yield on your farm is just so much better. So can we grow bananas without blue plastic around it? Yes, we can, but the yield is going to be less. And you saw that agricultural yield that we saw on Roelof's presentation, and a lot of that is thanks to plastic. So if one just stick to agriculture for a moment, and you look at the whole tunnels, greenhouses, big ones, small ones, straight netting, all to create a little protective environment to improve the yield. If you look at mulch films, now mulch films can be biodegradable plastic, or it can be plastic that you can harvest and reuse them again. But I mean, fantastic for crop yield. Then if we look at impacts business, which is just in the bin side, but so much of the agricultural products, which is plastic. I mean, your crates, your bins, your fencing posts, your tanks, you can name it. There's just massive lists of the stuff we use. So the secret is to reuse and reuse and reuse, and not starting a new one every time. That's a challenge for logistics. Because if you put it in a cardboard box, you send it off, I'll buy a box. But if it's in a plastic container, you need to get that back, because that's the whole purpose. So we need to still figure out in our transport industry, how do we deal with those reverse logistics? And it's doable, we must just apply our minds. Straightforward on food waste, we know packaging is a big thing, and the cucumber, I'm sure you've seen numerous times, that you actually gain another 10 days because of that little piece of plastic around it. If we look at stuff like chicken, or meat, or protein in general, because they said we mustn't eat meat anymore, is that what I was hearing? So but you create again that little micro atmosphere to make that meat look pink for the whole time that it's on the shelf, and you know that when you take it home, it's still perfect. If one just look at the so-called paper products, that depends on a plastic layer on the inside, which gives you that moisture barrier, it gives you that sealability, which you're not going to have necessarily on paper itself. So these are all things that we don't actually think about, because have you ever thought about your 2 kilos, what is that small pack, 2.5 kilos of sugar, that it's plastic on the inside? Because otherwise they can't put that seal layer on there, it won't keep the moisture out. So we need that. Active packaging, that's a total new topic, we can probably spend a day on that. Where you physically put in the packaging into the plastic, you put an additive in that steals the microbials. And that product just lasts so much longer. You can do it with additives, or you can do it with modified atmospheres, which we now have sulfur that you pump into it. People said, not so good. But the whole purpose of that is that we have natural stuff that's not loaded with preservatives. And you can do that with a little piece of plastic around it. So what is packaging actually doing when we talk food waste? Now, interesting, about 3 weeks ago, I got 2 invitations for Zoom meetings literally next to each other on my email list. The first one was, how do we get rid of plastics and single-use plastics? And the second one says, come and talk to us about the importance of plastics in food safety and food waste. I thought, shucks, how do we get these 2 audiences actually to talk to each other? Because that's the challenge there. But yeah, we know food depends on plastic for waste. So if we have a longer shelf need, it means we save energy, and it means when we save energy, we save emissions. Now just a quick fact, and I think Jaco have alluded to that, to grow 1 kilogram of beef, it's known that you have the emissions, that's the equivalent of 3 hours in the traffic. So I'll be eating a kilo of steak at a time, I don't quite get there. But that's the equivalent to get it to there. So it's about the emissions when we save energy. So imagine you have a piece of meat now that didn't have the plastic wrapping around it, that didn't last, that go rotten and end up in the bin, which you bought from Impact. I mean, you're going to end up with all that loss up to that point. And you can read many, many articles, scientific articles, that tells you the packaging around that product is a fraction of the carbon footprint if you look at what's actually inside it. So the fruit or the veggies or the protein that you package, that's where the carbon footprint sits. So if you have 1 day less on the shelf or 5% in your rubbish bin, that's the impact. That piece of plastic is a tiny, tiny fraction of it. Plastics save fuel, and that comes back to the emissions. Now that we can fly again, if you see your passenger next to you is very nervous and sitting there, you just say, relax, 50% of this plane is plastic, man. You just, you see how they start panicking. But that's the fuel efficiency. We look at motor cars. I drive a 25 Polo Cross. And if we just look at a 20 years ago car, which was varsity days, with everyone, all the engineers was driving Jettas, we have a considerable vehicle mass saving till today. And what is the impact of that is a massive fuel efficiency increase. We just get much further on a car that we can do now. With my little Polo Cross, I can happily get my 4.95 in Joburg traffic liters per 100 kilometers. The Jetta was definitely not doing that. So it just shows us, and that brings us back to those less emissions. And you saw the figures earlier on about CO2, nitrogen, methane, which is all coming out of our exhaust pipe. What else is good about the plastic in a motor car? The whole safety aspect. And if you look at the photographs or you drive past the accident now, I mean, that car is a wreck. There's like hardly anything left there, and the driver is standing next to the car. A bit beverasies, but he's alive. Could you do that with a steel car? So the safety aspects around our motor cars and around us is just phenomenal. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't use a police picture, But okay. So plastic saves lives. You look at bulletproof vests, and you're just looking at the safety equipment. You look at these shields, riot shields that the guy is using, all plastics. Get a bit closer to home. We're getting to the age now where a lot of my friends is wearing this tiny little thing in their ears so they can hear better. Or if you think about the men specifically, if they get like older than 55 and they have heart problems, they use a little plastic tube to open your arteries, to put in whatever formulas they have to put in there to open your arteries. I mean, you can't even see the bloody things, they're small. If we start looking at corneas, plastic corneas is now relatively common, where you couldn't see, you had potential blindness, and the next moment there's a little plastic thing on your eye. If you know that your artificial cornea is plastic, are you still going to say, ban plastic? Yeah, maybe you don't mind because you won't see it anymore. I'm sure you all looked at Ntanu with the Olympics. I don't know who watched it. It was absolutely fantastic. At the Paralympics, Ntanu, which is that stage, he's 19 years old, he's in Affis Boisa in Pretoria. He's matric this year, and he's really a 400-meter athlete. But there isn't a 400-meter Paralympics, so he had to practice for the 200, which is a bit short for him because it takes time before he gets into the rhythm. And literally 3 weeks before they left, he took on long jumping. And he went for a crash course on how to long jump. And his first jump was a record. His third jump was an improvement of his own first jump record. Absolutely phenomenal. With a pair of plastic legs, feet and legs. I wanted to watch it because I just know if he lands on his feet, that's bye-bye plastic. So his whole technique was landing on his bum, feet in the air, basically what you're seeing there. But absolute fantastic. You can't do it without that. But we also have it in animals. If you just look at artificial limbs, and I know it's a bit of a non-normal thing, but shucks, if you love your horse and you can give it a new leg, just think of the pleasure you're still going to get out of that. This whole thing about carbon, and I know we talk a lot about it, where if you compare, and the slides there is really just saying if you take Europe, because I don't have the figures for South Africa, and you take all the carrier bags in the EU for 1 year, and you replace it with paper bags. Because that's what our retailers are pushing for now. Let's go paper, let's go paper. We will need 2.2 million additional trees per year to get that paper. And remember, some of the paper goes back as paper. So that's just the extra bit that's going to be new. The carbon impact of that is going to be enormous because we cut down those carbon sinks that we're looking for. So before you just say, I don't like the plastic on the beach, let's go paper, you have to look at the whole picture of where's the paper coming from, or the cardboard box, or the metal can, or whatever. And there's endless websites. I didn't put it on a slide somewhere, but if you want to make a note of www.plasticsparadox.com. It's a scientist guy that's not getting employed by any plastics company, not like me that gets his money out of the plastics industry, that did independent research and say, how much of these things are actually true and how much is emotional? So it gives you nice, easy, quick facts if you need to really talk about the advantages of that. Plastics makes us have fun. I don't know when last we've been to a ski holiday in England. Although this winter, I think the roads area was open for a while, but then we were not allowed to travel out of Gauteng, so that didn't help. But your thermal underwear, your ski shoes, your polo fleece, all of that is plastic. And the other part is it keeps you safe whilst you're having fun. Don't know if we have rock climbers here, but think of your helmet. Although if you're going to fall 300 meters, I'm not sure the helmet will help, but at least it's there for shorter paths. If you go scuba diving, your goggles, your whole breathing apparatus is all based on plastic. Or if you just go skateboarding, your knees, your elbows, all of those foam padding is plastic. So you can have fun and be safe. Yeah, I think most of the youngsters now, even the people just watching us online on Zoom at the moment, sits behind a plastic computer with plastic earmuffs, a plastic little speaker. It's really just all over. So for us to communicate and to have fun, we really depend on that plastic. Now you can say, yeah, but that's the internet. But the internet says we have this under the sea cable that's connecting us to the rest of the world. And from the recycling point, what is interesting, they're busy replacing the cable from us to Europe, and the old redundant cable is coming back to South Africa because it's a local company that has a contract for that, South African company. And the amount of plastics that's coming out of the old cable that have been under the sea for, I think it's 35 years. And they're not replacing it because the plastic is now tired, they're replacing it because the technology has changed. And they're bringing that cable back, they recover the copper, they recover both the two types of plastics that surround that cable. So if one look at just every day our kettle cables, the cables linking us up here, plastic. If you then say optical fiber, again we're talking plastic. Renewable energy that we heard a lot about. Many components out of those photovoltaic panels is plastic. The wind turbines, it's composites, plastic. It's getting quiet now. Is there anything in our lives where we don't have plastic? So it's just underground. If you just go home underneath this hotel, we're looking at pipes. Clean water in, dirty water out. We're looking at septic tanks. We're looking at all of that stuff, just making sure your house is clean and hygienic and well serviced. Inside the house, plastic window frames is not that common in South Africa, but our gutters and our plumbing and the white stuff around your house, which is all plastic. Inside, we're looking at louvers, we're looking at Venetian blinds, we're looking at flooring. So maybe, who was that brave gentleman that says we don't need plastics in our life? And I haven't even started talking about my clothing yet.
He left.
Hey? You left? So yes, I think plastic is part of our life, and we can continue, and I can really talk many longer about just everywhere where it is. And I haven't even touched about your garage yet, because if you just think of your playroom for the men and all the plastics that's there. So is plastic now the friend or the foe? Yeah, I think only you've convinced us it's really the friend. But why do we see that thing? So if it is so fantastic, why is it lying on the pavement? Why is it lying on our beaches? Why are people chucking it out the window when they just enjoyed a nice Steel's burger or whatever, and they don't want to carry that till they get to a bin? Because you don't have to live in a township where there's no services, where you still see littering. So how do we change that mindset? How do we fix it? And maybe we should ask you guys here, which is not directly involved like some of us, to say, what are the magic wand? How do we change the villain, the thing we hate with a passion, into our hero? And at the moment, we don't have much in South Africa besides recycling. So I need just to touch on the recycling and say, if we can create a bigger market for recycling, if we can recycle more, and you've heard Impact is investing big bucks in growing the recycling side, that is going to help. What plastics do we recycle the most of? Currently. LD, I hear Coke bottles, PET, Coke bottles, water bottles. So if one just look at 2020, the very latest stats, don't tell Plastics SA because I haven't actually given them the figures, but you have it already. If one look at 2020, the biggest part there, 106,000 tons of LD was recycled, which all last year. And LD is that stupid little small stuff that we don't actually think about. Your bread bags, the wrapping around your toilet paper, the wrapping around your plastic rice and around your frozen veggies. Imagine how many bread bags you need to get to 106,000 tons. That's a lot. But that's what we already recycled last year. I'm not saying by any chance it's enough. We still have massive areas to go, but we are already doing something. On the HD side, our second biggest material that we recycled, 62,000 tons last year. Crates is doing a big part of that, so that would be included, some of the stuff you use as customers of Impact. Milk bottles is incredibly popular. You'll hear from Nikki just after my talk now. So just completed a study to say between 75% and 80% of every milk bottle that's made in South Africa has been recycled. So if you have that choice between a liquid carton or a 2-liter milk bottle, guess which one I'm picking? Because I know it's going to be recycled. If we look at PET, enormous challenges last year because we didn't travel and we didn't stop quickly at the Cecil garage for the 500 milliliters of cool drink. So the market last year was right down, and therefore the volumes were right down. But they typically sit at number 2. LD stays the biggest material. So if you look at the volumes. Polypropylene, that's anything from your tiny little chocolate wrapper, your big bulk bags, your Coke wrappers, your margarine tubs, all of that. The challenge around the little chocolate wrapper, and I'm not particularly a fan of Kit Kat, I just happen to have a nice picture, is that how does it get from my bin to the guy that actually makes wash bowls and basins out of it? And that's where we're lacking in a South African context. The others, the smaller ones, the polystyrene, the hangers is by far the most popular because they get collected at the retailer. You see the lady who bought an Edgar shirt, she chucked the hanger behind her in the box. These people servicing that. If it's broken, it goes for recycling. They make new hangers. If it's still perfectly clean, they change the label, they clean the hanger, and it goes back into the system. And then if we look at PVC, very, very little packaging, so I can't have packaging pictures there, but gumboots. The average life of a gumboot apparently in South Africa is 6 weeks. Then you can get a new one, and the old one goes straight into recycling. So if you buy a pair of, I'm not wearing my Bata Toughies today, but if you wear a pair of locally made shoes, maybe a gumboot that was before the sole, or cable. That's also pretty good. So what can we do about recycling if we sit in this room? We definitely have to make it more visible. Because the average person out there says we're not recycling. Because guess what? I leave my bin there on the pavement. If I live in an area where the waste picker comes and take out the Coke bottles, okay, so the rest doesn't get recycled. The big harvesting happens on our landfills, which is the most horrible place to let it happen. So how do we visibly say, I'm taking my recyclables out? I'll actually, don't drive specially because your carbon footprint is then ridiculous. But next time you go past that area, you drop off your recyclables at the recycler or a waste management company. How do we make sure we create markets? If you have a choice between a pair of shoes imported from Italy with virgin soles or a pair that's made in Harrismith with South African recycled telephone cables. But do we know that? Are people telling us that? They're very quick to tell us, you know, this car has so much recycled content, but we don't actually tell the consumers that. And maybe we should start saying to them that this box of apples that you're buying is in a crate that has 50% recycled content in it. This bottle of shampoo has 40% recycled content in it. So we start building these pictures. Okay, enough about recycling. Separation at source, we have to have it. If we look at South Africa as a whole, less than 10% of people living in urban areas, metropoles, have actually a 2-bin system or a bag bin system. How many of you have a service that collects your recyclables? What is that? 6%. It's not 10% yet. And are we engaging in that? Are we telling our neighbors, hey, I don't see you putting out recyclables. What's your problem? So we really need to grow that. The waste. We're not only talking plastics here. I'm talking everything. Do you need it? Don't take it. I mean, the whole debate about drinking stores. Do you really need a drinking store? So don't take it. You buy takeaway food. Why do they give me a whole sachet with a knife, a fork, a spoon, sugar, salt, and I'm going to eat it home? So say, no thank you, give it to the next person, or only give me a fork. We just waste miles too much. And it's not only for our packaging and the stuff we buy. Maybe I should check your food plates tonight. I mean, you dish up yourself and then you leave food that's going into the bin. If you could shower for 3 minutes and you lie in a bath overflowing, and the ladies, we love to topping it up with warm water again and again and again, till eventually someone shouted, I need the bathroom. Our vehicles, I'm very proud of my Polo Cross with below 5 liters per 100 kilometers. How many of you are driving a 3 liter because it looks nice? Something to think about. Bio-based materials. Now, I just read this morning an article online that the sugar industry says, please, government must help them with all that money Rudolf says they have to generate bio-based materials. At the moment in South Africa, we have one polymer that's made from sugar bagasse, which is Braskem, but it's harvested in Brazil, made in India, and then in South Africa we use the polyethylene. I don't think it's green anymore. So we really need to see how we're changing that. Now, Maposa said we have to look at renewable energy, we have to look at renewable fuels. We really, as an industry, have to start saying, how can we grow bio-based polyethylene? Now, polyethylene currently, or ethylene, the gas, is a waste product from the coal system. So we're all using waste. But if they're going to stop making petrol, then we're in trouble. So what are we having as a backup? Buy local. Do you actually check for that? My famous one is I go to shop like Checkers, and I'll name them, because we want to buy some chicken susatis, and these beautiful ones, and hubby says, are we going for the mustard, or are we going for the barbecue? I said, none. He looks at me and said, why not? I said, look there, product of Spain. Why do we have barbecue susatis from Spain? If we have a massive chicken farm in Stallerton, I mean, or in Boschfontein for that matter, out the corner. So think local when you go to the shops. Please, you have to. Prior for coming here, SABS just launched their buy local whole standardization setup, and it looks fantastic, but it's not going to work if me and you is not saying, I'm not buying that product of Spain. I want to buy my own. Invest in alternate recycling. Not everything can be economically recycled. So are we looking at places, areas where we can develop markets for stuff that is not so easy to recycle? And there's numerous, I don't know, I hope every one of you have a park bench made out of multi-layered plastics already in your garden. Or if not that, a bit of paving. I have quite a nice paving stretch around my house, where in Joburg with a thunderstorm every day, just take the lawn out. So now I have a nice multicolour polywood made from Kit Kat wrappers and bologna packaging. So your streets, pyrolysis, all of that. I'm sure Nikki is going to touch on some of that. How do we actually solve challenges? And then my last one there is, are we taking responsibility? And I'm looking at each of us in our little environments we're in. Being it on a blueberry farm, being it in a factory, being it behind an IT desk at a conference. What do? We can say it's not my fault, but if it's not your fault, it doesn't mean it's not your problem. And we're all living on this one planet, and we need to say, we know plastic is absolutely fantastic, but how do we deal with it? So just a recap, recycling, separation at source, waste less, look at bio-based where you can, buy local, invest in alternatives, and make sure you take responsibility for your waste. I insist that I take out our rubbish bin at home, which is once every month, because we recycle. So, Loki, you have to make smaller bins. My bin never gets more than half. But every time I feel so guilty if I think this is stuff that I've used. Did I really need it? And do I really want it for someone else to go and put it on a landfill? So we must really get that, take responsibility. So key. So are we going to solve the waste, the litter, the environmental problems if we stop using plastic? Because, I mean, there's numerous facts to tell you plastic is still the most green material if we don't put it on the pavement. Because that's the area where we fail. So it's part of our lives, we can't argue that. I think we know that now, it is the best material. But what are we going to do about our planet covered in plastic? And each of us have to take responsibility and say, what are these various solutions that we can use to make sure we get our planet back? And we heard from Jaco, it's a little bit too late because we're on October and the 4th of June is gone. So we're already living in the red, so we need to fix that. Thank you, and I hope there's plenty of questions. The first question is, what is not done in South Africa which leads to rivers, dams and oceans to protect them from being contaminated or being filled with polluting substances? Now, that's a very interesting question because plastic is the visible part. And some plastic floats so we can see them. What concerns me is the stuff that we cannot see. I'll use a quick example. One of the Northwest students on the advisory panel for sampling rivers for microplastics. And between Grahamstown and Northwest, they were talking about how do we actually sample, and she was telling us she holds a little tea sieve and a broomstick, and she keeps it in the water for 3 minutes, and then she takes it back to the laboratory and analyzes it. And as we know now, most of that is textiles. So every time we wash our clothing, those fibers are just leaking into the rivers. But anyway, I said to her, Gary, now, why are you using a 3-meter broomstick? Just get into the water. She said, no, my boots disintegrate. That water is so polluted. Her thesis is going to say she found so much microplastic in the river. It's not going to say the river was so polluted that her shoes disintegrate if she gets in there. So, to answer the question, how do we keep pollution out of our rivers, including plastic and paper and newspapers and sewage? So we need a working infrastructure. And I think we've all listened to Rudolph, we all see this country, we see what's happening in our municipalities, it's just not happening. So, vote correctly. How can we deal with the behavior of residents when it comes to waste? I don't think, I'm ready to say shame. Tell them, why is there so much recyclable stuff in your rubbish bin? Why are you not separating? Because we see in Jaco's thing, behavioral change is probably the most difficult. And if I don't believe it in my mind, you can preach to me as much as you want. If I don't actually believe it and want to change. What solutions can be employed by the municipalities to deal with waste? Are there anyone from the municipalities here? No, we're not going to put any on the spot. Who else? There. Oh, brilliant. So what can you answer for us?
We have some ideas. That's why we asked, because we're not getting it right. So perhaps there are experts in here who can advise us on how to deal with this problem.
I love that. So what is the audience saying? We have 1 minute, 15 minutes to answer. What can the municipalities do? Let's see if we can come up with some ideas.
I think we need to be kinder as residents to the people that come around to clean out our dustbins and take our waste. And the municipalities should try and make their lives a little bit easier. Maybe the municipalities and Impact can design a bucket. So when they pull these things, I mean, they load lots and lots of plastics, and you see them struggling. We must try and help them to do this. They make a living out of it, plus they are helping our environment. So why are we mean to them? Why are we not assisting them? Just because they look poor.
So the whole waste picker interaction is what you say. I don't believe the waste picker should be in the bin walking 10 kilometers. I should believe all the recyclables should be in one area. Then you say, come and pick for us here. So you don't have to walk. But that's a different, so the whole thing of getting the recyclables out of the stream. That's what I'm hearing from him. Any other ideas? There's one. Try your voice, maybe it's loud enough.
Oh, yes, it is. So I think you mentioned something that is key in your presentation earlier. You mentioned that we need to separate at source. I think firstly, getting all the households into the behavior of separating waste. And then we can bring in municipalities, say municipality, now that we've got separate waste, we need a truck that can load cartons only, or bottles only, or this and only. Because when the recycling trucks come around, they pick up, let's say 3-4 bags inside this big wheelie bin,
Massive truck.
right? There's everything under the sun in those bags. So even these picketers that are trying to kind of leverage whatever, they're also leveraging inside already a Dierbekar bag, right? So it has to start with us separating, because I think if municipality knows that I've got 500 carton bins that I need to pick up, there's better planning. I've got 500 bins of plastic that I need to pick up, there's better planning. But at the moment, I think before we start pointing at the municipality, from a household point of view, what role are we doing in terms of separating from the source?
So advertising for tomorrow, we have a breakaway session on sustainability. So we only have 2 people now. Bring all those ideas, think about them tonight when you listen to that what do you call that, over reading your mind? So we bring those ideas. My time is up. Thank you very much. You were